There's an expression in the old sailing community: below 40 degrees south, there is no law. Below 50 degrees south, there is no God. When the surface of the ocean is traveling faster than the water underneath, that's when you get waves. And if that surface water is going fast enough, those waves build to the point that the face of the wave can become vertical. The forecast was for 7 to 9 meter waves, but what I saw was 10 and 11 meter waves, which is I can't describe how big those are. And I started seeing waves breaking around me. And at that point, I kind of had a realization that if I dropped X-Wing on her roof with the full weight of the ocean, I'm not sure. I can't say for certain that her windows would take that.
Hi, welcome to the Growth Mixtape Podcast, and I'm your host, Bob Mathers. We have one rule here. We're going to chase our curiosity way outside our comfort zones. The more uncomfortable and awkward, the better. We're going to talk to people you've never heard of doing jobs you didn't know existed. We're going to hear human stories about the things that connect us, what we can learn from one another, and what we can take away to apply to our own lives. These conversations might not seem to have a lot in common at first, but just like songs on a mixtape, they create something memorable and emotional. Today we talk to Drew Smith, a sailor, storyteller, and seeker who just completed a 6-year voyage to the far side of the world on his 32-foot sailboat. Drew set out to reach his antipode, the exact opposite point on Earth from where he was born. He's got incredible stories, but the one that still haunts me is getting caught in a storm in 30-foot waves 750 miles off the coast of Australia in the middle of the night, all alone. Now, I grew up around boats and I could listen to Drew's tales of nautical disaster for hours. There are so many takeaways from this conversation, but the most dramatic is this idea that not only can you spend your life consumed by these big goals that are never as satisfying as you think when you achieve them, but that you come back to a life, friends, a job that no longer fits. Everyone expects you to be the same person, but you've changed. And you don't need to sail around the world for years to know what this feels like. If you're working on yourself and sometimes feel weighted down by an old life that no longer serves you, you'll love hearing how Drew is navigating his way back to a life that fits this new version of him. You're never going to forget this conversation, so batten down the hatches and please enjoy Drew Smith. All right, welcome Drew Smith to the podcast. I got to say, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. We've been trying to make it work for a while, and it's been a long time coming.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, and sorry for my crazy amounts of travel all everywhere. I know it's a little bit difficult to pin down some time.
Well, yeah. So we're going to spend most of our time talking about that, about this amazing voyage that you took to the other side of the world. And I grew up on boats. I've just got a million questions about this. There's just so much of that I'm fascinated by. But I feel like I'd love to know a little bit about how you grew up and where this kind of thirst for adventure comes from, and whether you've always had it or whether it creeped up on you.
Okay, so that's a great question, and it all kind of ties back together, to be honest. So I grew up in a very very small town on the east coast of Canada, just like 4,000 people, a little farming community, more cows than humans, called Sussex. And when I finally achieved escape velocity in after returning from college, and realizing that the opportunities that were available for me in that town were exactly the same ones that were there, right when I graduated high school, and we needed to get out. And so my best friend, my baby sister, and I, we drove across Canada, and we landed in Calgary, with $800 to our name, and managed to get our feet down and actually make a go of it. But I was only in Calgary for about a year before I realized, wow, if Calgary is that much bigger than Sussex, then the world is a lot bigger than I understood it to be. Um, and so it sort of set this seed that I wanted to see, just okay, well, how far? Well, how much bigger? Like, where's my place in this? Where do I fit best? If I fit so much better in Calgary than I did in Sussex, so it was within a year I got a job offer in Vancouver. I went out there, and then about a year and a half after that, I got a job offer in Costa Rica that moved me to Central America for a couple of years, and it just sort of set this I mean, this wheel in motion of like wanting to constantly be wondering what's over the horizon, wondering what's next, what's new, um, and it's so that's actually created some problems because now that I'm pushing 50, I don't really I have all of these tiny roots everywhere in the world, but I don't have the roots that I envy in a lot of my friends where they've got, you know,
Mm.
deep-seated friend groups that they hang out every weekend. And yeah, it's been interesting. The thought of like, well, if I were to get married, for instance, where would that happen? That would provide for the most amount of friends to be able to come to the ceremony, and that's a good question. I don't actually have a good answer for that yet.
But you must have friends that you grew up with in Sussex that never felt the desire to leave and maybe are still there with those same opportunities that you saw in high school that you looked at and said, yeah, not enough here for me. It was enough for a lot of people.
That's true, and it's hard in some ways because there's a big part of me that I can't deny that looks at that and wonders, what could they have made for themselves if they'd achieved escape velocity. But on the other hand, the lives that they've made for themselves there, I mean, I envy a lot about it. Like, some of my good friends have just beautiful families, and at this point, their kids are old enough that they're leaving home. They've done this great life adventure that everyone talks about, where they've like made people. And and those people are good people, like they've done well at it. And I just kind of skirted around that one, and never that just never happened for me.
Well, yeah, talking as someone that has made people and has made some pretty amazing people, I wouldn't have it any other way. But I've got to admit, I'm sure me and a lot of your friends are looking at your life and the travel you're doing like, oh my God, man, like what I would do to be able to just take off for months at a time. So I don't know. I guess the grass is always greener.
It's true. One of the things that I've been thinking about lately is the concept of success. How does that um, how does that tie into like what I choose to have done with my life versus what my friends have chosen to do with their lives? Like which one of us has succeeded? And I think that's entirely subjective. If you don't define early what success looks like, then you don't recognize it when you get there. I've been thinking about that a lot.
Right.
If I could, even 5 years later, reach back to 22-year-old Drew and say, like, you did it, you did the thing, you were dreaming in your basement in Sussex of like living in a city and going to raves, and the, here you are, you've done it, you've made it, you've achieved that thing. But it was that goalpost always moved just a little bit further out, and so I was like, oh, just a little further, just move to another city, move further, do more. um
Hmm.
and you never really sit and realize, oh, like I am exactly where 5 years ago Drew was dreaming to be. I've achieved that thing. So, and to tie that to my far other side project where I sailed to my antipode, um, it was really important to me when I started designing that project that it had such like a really clear finish line. And so that, I managed that, but I think that's the first time in my life I've ever done that for myself, like come up with an idea, planned it, executed on it, and finished it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'd love to come back to why that was important to you, but you did just drop a little Easter egg there about your antipode project. So for I had never heard of that before I came across you, Drew. I had a mutual friend that said, "Hey, there's this guy over Instagram and TikTok chronicling his journey to his antipode," and I had to look that up. So can you tell me what an antipode is and how this came to be?
Absolutely. So an antipode is an opposite. So it can be used to say like my jock brother is the antipode of my nerd sister. It can be the opposite of two things, but the most common usage of it is geographical. So they say antipodes are 2 points on the exact opposite side of the Earth from one another, are antipodal to each other, like they are the antipode of each other. So if we can back it up a bit, that idea, the idea of like of opposites kind of got stuck in my head a few years ago. I've learned over the years that if an idea gets stuck in my head, then there's probably something there, and I should give it some time, some thought, some spare cycles, I like to say, and let my brain chew on it and figure out why it feels important. And so I got stuck sort of looping on the idea of opposites for a while. Like, for instance, every year there's a day that goes by, and it's the day that you were born. And so we celebrate that. We recognize it and we celebrate it. But also every year that goes by, there's a day that goes by that is the day that you're going to die in sometime in the future. Like maybe next year, maybe this year, maybe 30 years from now. But we don't recognize it because we don't know what it is, and we've never, there's no way to look that up. But it just like that idea fascinates me. Like why that, you know, it's the opposite, but it's something we don't know. So when I was thinking about that in the earth and thinking about, well, where I'm standing right now, what is on the opposite side of this? And as I started to chewed on that idea a while, I realized a few things about the opposite side of the earth. And one of them is that that is the farthest distance from you on the earth that you could possibly travel without, leaving the planet, without going to space. And and when I puzzled, well, what about if you were standing on the top of Everest? Like, does that make a huge difference? Like, how much further is that to the exact opposite side of the Earth? Turns out it's not hardly any at all. Like, even if you're on the International Space Station, for instance, if you take that like a standard globe and you stack like I think it's four dimes onto the globe, that's the height of the International Space Station. So the actual distance to the opposite side of the world from that height is so negligible. Anyway, I got obsessed with this idea, and I was sitting in my sailboat in San Francisco one night after a party, kind of falling asleep, and I had this like flash of insight when I was thinking about trying to go to sleep, and my brain was still worrying on this, and I thought, okay, well, what is the antipode of like of my hometown? And then I thought, well, what about, my childhood bedroom? And then I was like, whoa, if I think about, where I came into this earth, with the hospital that I was born in, that would be that would be the farthest distance I could possibly travel in my life, which would be from the time I came into the world to the exact opposite side of the earth, like 20,000 kilometers in any direction. That's the farthest I can possibly go in my lifetime on Earth, is that spot. At the time, I was already sort of planning a trip across the Pacific. I was building a boat to do it. I wanted to, for years, go across the Pacific Ocean, but that was solid. Suddenly, I realized, oh my God, that's where I need to go. That's my destination. I'll go to Australia and I'll find that spot. But it turns out only 7% of the land mass of the Earth has an antipode that's also on land. So when I found out that it was in the water, I was like, okay, well, that kind of ties in with sailing. That's gonna be good. But then when I looked it up, it turned out the antipode of the place that I was born in Sussex, Canada, that was about 1,000 miles south of Perth, Australia. That's that. I was like, that's a big voyage. I kind of already had a sailboat. I was sort of building it towards going across the Pacific, but then all of a sudden I knew with a flash of insight, I knew exactly where I was going, and it was about south of Perth. It was way way out in the ocean, and it was south of Australia.
Did you start from where you were born and sail to your antipode, or did you just start from San Francisco or wherever you happen to be?
Well, I started from San Francisco because you can't really sail across Canada. It doesn't make as much
You
sense.
go the long way, I
And
guess.
I exactly. Uh, so anyway, when I plotted it out, it made the most sense to go across the Pacific first. And I feel okay about that on a project basis because, well, when I left home with my sister and my best friend, we drove from New Brunswick out to Calgary, and then we drove to Vancouver. So, and I've sailed from Vancouver down to San Francisco, where I bought the boat. In fact, I left in 2018 from San Francisco to Mexico and spent a year rebuilding the boat. And then in 2019, end of 2019, we finally were finished, I left from La Paz, Mexico, and started headed for Ecuador with the intention of going from Ecuador to the Galapagos to Rapa Nui, the Easter Island, and then on out to the Pitcairns, and then the back way up into the Tuamotu archipelago in the French Polynesia. But that was right in about January of 2020. So we all know what happened in February of 2020, and everything shut down. And so I kind of got stuck in Mexico for um, Oh, yeah, probably about 2 months. And in, I think, May, no, it had to be May because it was May the 4th. It was Star Wars Day. We finally gave up on Mexico, and we kind of cut and run in the middle of the night. We had left from Mexico and headed 32 days at sea straight out to Maui. We were the only tourists there because there was no air travel at the time. And then we got chased out of Kauai by Hurricane Douglas, which kind of came in from the southeast and was headed straight for us. And we had to make a decision. Do we anchor the boat as best we can and go to shore and possibly watch, my home be destroyed, or do we run? And we made the call and we ran, and the hurricane actually veered and chased us for about a day and a half, which was terrifying. Um, but eventually passed about 400 miles south of us, which in hurricane terms is a little too close for comfort. But yeah, I'm 32 days back to Canada, and then I got to actually do the Canada to San Francisco leg on the boat. Yeah, sorry, I'm going off on crazy tangents here.
Well, that's awesome because the tangents is what I'm all about. But I'd love to know what it's like being chased by a hurricane.
So we had two methods of communication at the time. One of them was the this little Garmin InReach thing, which is it does live satellite texting. So that was one way that we could kind of keep in touch with people. But the other way was ham radio. And I'm actually a third generation ham radio nerd. So like my grandfather was the chief radio engineer for CBC Radio Canada for 40 years or something, and my uncles are all ham guys. So I it's in my blood. I really like my radios. And I was using that with some software tools to send and receive emails and subscribe to various, like deep Pacific Ocean weather advisories and such. And so we got, 6 or 7 times a day new weather data that I could overlay on my charts and see exactly what, the hurricane was doing. And in all of the hurricane data in history, there's only been one hurricane that has ever approached Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands from the southeast and turned north.
Mm.
Every time they basically arrive from the southeast, and as they hit the islands, they veer west until Douglas. Now there's been two. So Douglas arrived and kind of veered north. It did pass between us and Kauai. So we left from Kauai from Hanalei Bay, which you know from the song "Puff the Magic Dragon," in a land called Honolulu. So that's where Hanalei come. That's Hanalei is famous for that bay. So we left from there and we just hammered north as hard as we could in some pretty unpleasant conditions. And we managed to make it, we were 5 days before it passed underneath us. So we had a few days to like that before it sort of even came close to Kauai. But the whole time we're like, okay, it's gonna veer west. Okay, it's gonna veer west. Okay, it's not veering west. Oh, it's veering north. Oh, that's not great. Okay, finally it's veering west again. But there was a couple of days where it seemed to be turning to chase us, and that was a little terrifying.
So when you say unpleasant, like how big are the waves?
It's not that the waves were huge, it's just that it was very rocky, very uncomfortable, and very wet. And if you don't want that at the start of a trip, because anything that gets wet with seawater is never going to dry again, unless you rinse it with fresh water, and fresh water is kind of a premium out in the ocean. You have to kind of wait for a really sunny day to get enough sun to fill the tanks full of water, to rinse off the clothes, and then hopefully dry them out. So yeah, it's an unpleasant way to spend a few days, especially when you're being chased by a hurricane.
But so that part you were doing with your girlfriend, you said?
Yeah, exactly. So that was two back-to-back 32-day passages. So one from Mexico to Hawaii, and one from Hawaii to Canada. So after that, she was like, "Yeah, I still love sailing, but I don't need to do long ocean passages anymore." And I'm like, "Good, that's pretty fair."
Yeah.
It's what I do really gravitate to, though. I love that the long passages are when you can really get into that rhythm the of the ocean and the day-to-day stuff and the sleep schedules, and it's you really know exactly who you are. You know exactly what you need to do. There's kind of a zen to it. There's purpose there, purpose and drive, because everything that you do is towards a goal.
You must become, I imagine, really attuned to the boat. That's a new sound. Or That doesn't sound the way it has for the last, I don't know, 5,000 hours or whatever it is. Like you would notice small changes right away.
Oh, 100%. So because the sleep schedule is what we call polyphasic. Have you heard this word before?
No.
So when I'm alone, especially, that when you sleep in roughly 20-minute chunks. So I go to sleep with my phone on my chest set to vibrate and with the alarm turned all the way up. Then I'll sleep on the couch for 20 minutes. And when the alarm goes off, I get up, I look 360 degrees around the boat to make sure there's nothing coming. Listen to make sure that there are no new sounds or craziness. Like look at the computer to see is there any new targets coming on the radar or on the AIS. And then if everything looks okay, then I go back down to sleep, set my alarm for another 20 minutes, do it again. And I'll probably do 12 of those in a row overnight. Just, get up, look around, especially offshore, because there's no boat that's so fast that it can make it from the horizon to hit you in 20 minutes. And so that you get into that sort of rhythm. But what it does also instill into you is this ability to like wake up on a dime. Like if the slightest little new noise or I've finally learned to tune out the flying fish so that when a flying fish jumps onto the boat, it does this kind of weird flapping sound that, like, as it's trying to get off. And the first 100 times that would wake me up. But my brain's kind of like, you don't have to wake up for fish. And now I don't anymore. But I'll still, like, oh no, something in the cupboard fell over. I'm like, what went clunk? And I'm awake, and that's carried into the rest of my life. I work sometimes as a medic with a crew here in California, and even though I'm asleep, if somebody comes by and like shakes my tent and says, "Hey, we need an extra hand," like I'm up like that. I don't have to think about it. I'm awake and I'm on my feet and go.
Yeah. I've got so many questions about kind of the daily life of it, but before I forget, so most of the content that I saw from you was you doing a passage by yourself. So I was wondering, at what point does that happen? Is that the final leg that you get before you get to your antipode? And how would you describe those long passages being by yourself versus being with someone?
Well, so I didn't really set out to do a lot of it by myself. Crossing the Pacific, I had lots of friends come, especially cruising through Mexico and down the West Coast. I had lots of friends come, but the thing is, it's a very small boat. Like it's only a 34-foot sailboat. The kitchen and the living room and the bedroom are kind of all the same room. Like it's 100 square foot apartment. So the ideal is three people aboard, because with three people aboard, you can set up a watch schedule. And I find those fascinating. We've gone through a bunch of them, but the watch schedule with three, we always do, 4 hours on and then 8 hours off. So I'm on for 4 hours, the next person's on for 4 hours, the next person's on for 4 hours, I'm back on for 4 hours. And that gives
Mm.
everybody, more than enough time to get good rest. Everybody's available to help if there's an emergency. All hands on deck is not just a metaphor in this case. Like it's really, you'd get all hands on the deck. The thing that I wasn't really expecting or planning for was by the time I got to Australia, or even to Fiji, all of my closest trusted friends, all of the people that I want to spend that kind of time together with, and do, anybody that I can tolerate and that can tolerate my quirks for 2 weeks at a time, living in a tiny apartment without too many explosions. Those are all like longtime trusted friends who live in North America. And so getting those people to be able to drop work for a couple of weeks, might not know a month in advance exactly when those 2 weeks are going to be, because the nature of sailing is, I can be someplace or I can be sometime, but I can't guarantee both.
Right.
And so by the time I'm in Australia, I started, looking for crew locally. And I had a few crew come and stay with me that I just, found in Australia, who were just friends or hitchhikers, and had a few couple good experiences that way. But having bad crew is so much worse than having no crew. By the time I got to sort of northeastern Australia, it started to make more and more sense to just do it myself.
Hey, it's Bob, and I'm taking the Growth Mixtape on the road in a series of keynote speeches inspired by the stories of my amazing guests. At their core, these signature talks are about how to get you and your teams off autopilot and stop settling for small incremental improvements. This isn't going to come from spewing business advice. My podcast is full of people that have done incredible things, and every one of them struggles with self doubt, imposter syndrome, and the crippling fear of judgment that holds so many of us back. They've also found ways through it by rediscovering their creativity, their curiosity, and the confidence to do scary things. Imagine the power of bringing these vulnerable stories to life, live and on stage, to help you and your teams hit your targets, find your voice, and be the rock stars you are. Book me for your next event at bobmathers.ca. Now back to the show. So, what's the longest you were out at sea by yourself?
That would be the last big one, which was 25 days. So that was from Bustleton, just south of Fremantle, all the way to Hobart, Tasmania. By that time, I was like, I had done most of Australia solo, and I had a couple of offers. And friends were like, listen, I know this is the big one. This is the one where you go south to your antipode and then across the roaring 40s for 18 days to get to Tasmania. Like, I'll come with you if you want. And honestly, because I was so used to being single-handed by that point, I actually turned down two offers because I was like, well, A, I can't absolutely guarantee your safety, and B, at this point it's kind of important that I feel like I should do this alone. I've done a bunch of smaller single-handed ocean passages, but this is the big one, and it's the longest one, and it's the most dangerous one, and I think I should probably do this by myself.
What makes it more dangerous? What's the roaring 40s?
Okay, so in the southern hemisphere, you have your different latitudes, the lines that go parallel to the equator. In the Southern Ocean, where there's nothing, and there's just the wind coming up from Antarctica, and nothing but ocean all the way around the world, and these systems that just roll around through. They call the 40 degrees, from 40 degrees to 50, the roaring 40s. There's always big
Mm.
wind. Well, not always, but the storms that roll through the roaring 40s are fierce and tremendous and can really mess you up. There's an expression in the old sailing community, um, below 40 degrees south, there is no law. Below 50 degrees south, there is no God.
Oh, man.
So so I came down as far as the 48 degrees south. I was like, maybe I should just go to 50 just to say I did it. And I was like, no, this is a terrible idea. No, let's make our way back north. This is dumb. The sort of the crux, the biggest and most scary piece of the entire 6-year passage happened on that trip across from Bustleton to Hobart. It was after I'd reached my antipode, which is, I had to go from Bustleton basically straight south for 7 days. But I hit my antipode, turned left, immediately hit a gale, had to stay for a couple of days just in a configuration called Hove 2, which is when you backwind the sails and just sort of park the boat in the ocean. You can just sort of ride out some bad weather that way, get some rest. I watched some movies, had sleep, and when it was time to shake out the sails again, I was fine for I would say about 10 days. And in the last 5 of those days, I started watching this big low pressure system that had been coming from the west, and it was moving slowly, but it was 30 35 knots wind, but it had been going for 12 days and nonstop with that kind of wind. And what that does is you start to raise really big seas.
Hmm.
Now, the math on that is my boat is 10 meters long. Let's just stick with meters instead of feet. It's 34 feet, but um, when the surface of the ocean is traveling faster than the water underneath, that's when you get waves. And if that surface water is going fast enough, those waves build to the point that the face of the wave can become vertical. And when that vertical happens and it falls over, that's what you call a breaking wave. Like you see those on the beach all the time. And that's mostly because the water underneath has become shallow, which
Hmm.
is slowed down, and so the faster water falls over, crashes on the shore. But for that to happen in the deep ocean, that there has to be a lot of wind and it has to be happening for a long time. And I was, had my Starlink and had my ham radio, and I was watching these systems moving towards me slowly, and I knew that it was going to be big waves. I knew that it was the forecast was for 7 to 9 meter waves, but what I saw was 10 and 11 meter waves, which is I can't describe how big those are. These are mountains of water that, like, as you know, I'm sitting at the helm of the boat and I'm looking back and I'm looking way up at waves that are coming from behind. And I was sailing pretty well, and I was like, I think I can handle this. I think I can go through the night. And right as it got dark, the wave system that low pressure had been building for weeks, right about then that hit me, and I started seeing waves breaking around me.
Mhm.
And the math on that is that a breaking wave with a face that is in height one third the length of your vessel. So it's like with me, I had a 10-meter boat, so a 3.3 meter breaking wave face. That is enough water to pick up the boat and completely roll it, like to throw it onto its roof. Um, which for a sailboat can be absolutely devastating. Like if
Mhm.
you that's a good way to lose your mast and be stuck out there. And at that point, I kind of had a realization that if I dropped X-wing on her roof with the full weight of the ocean, I can't say for certain that her windows would take that.
Mhm.
And if the windows smashed out, my heater was non-functional. So if I got everything wet on the inside, and I'm already wearing 3 layers of wool sweaters and stuff because it's quite cold. I've thought, wow, if I get thrown, I'm going to be in trouble. Like I don't think I will survive that. When I had that realization, that was basically the most scared I've been in my adult life. That I'm like, oh, I'm actually in trouble here.
Mhm.
But okay, so there's this tool called a Jordan Series drogue, and that's the tool that I built for exactly this kind of situation. It's basically 200 meters of rope, and the last 100 meters, or sorry, it's 200 feet, so it's 30 meters and then 30 meters and then like a 10-meter kind of bridle to attach it to the boat. So the last 30 meters has like 100 small parachutes there that are about probably 20 centimeters across, and they're sewn directly into the rope. So as if you hold the rope in one direction, it just slides through the water as though it's a rope. But if you pull the rope in the other direction, the parachute's
Mhm.
open, and it's what you call a drag device. Like it creates basically drag. So you have a very very strong bridle that's attached to the boat by like big beefy steel chain plates that are bolted directly to the hull of the boat, and then big shackles, and then this really strong material called Dyneema. It's a fiber, but it's stronger than steel. You can pick up a car with this stuff, and that like I had a bridled, meaning two pieces of line, one going from each side of the boat, out in a triangle out to meet this next piece of 30 meter, which was 1 inch thick, like ultra braid nylon, really wonderful rope, and then that's going back, and then that's spliced to the actual drogue, which is the 30 meters with the parachutes. And then at the end of that, you add like 20 feet of chain. The idea if your boat is headed downwind and the waves are coming from behind you, the thing you don't want to happen is a wave to pick up the boat, and what it will do is it will create enough drag behind the boat that as that wave is trying to break, it'll break through the boat and drag the boat up backwards through the breaking wave. Now, I know the physics of this, and I know I've run the numbers, I know the math, I've read everything there is to read about how to build one of these and how to use one of these. Um, but I'd never done it, and I'd never tested it. So that first 3 or 4 hours of hanging off of, and it felt, do you rock climb?
I've toyed with it, not really.
Okay. Well, you know what it feels like to be on on a on belay and be hanging over like certain depth below you, and
Right.
you've got a climbing rope, and you know that climbing rope is strong, and you know it can support your weight, but it's still like, wow, this is the spider web. If anything messes up here, I'm gonna fall, and I'm gonna fall to my death. And that feeling while being 750 miles south of Australia, all by myself, hanging off of this piece of rope that was dragging behind the boat. And short version is it worked perfectly. Everything worked exactly as it was designed. Everything was overbuilt to begin with, but oh my God, I was terrified. Like completely. almost not quite paralyzed in fear because I was moving around, but there was nothing else I could do. The really interesting part about it was that the way your brain processes cortisol in a situation like that, you can only be terrified for so long. Those terrified chemicals will eventually uh, be metabolized, and then you're left feeling this kind of like, wow, everything's still terrifying. What now? I watched some TV, and then I had a few naps, and then I got up and looked outdoors. And I'm like, well, yep, still terrifying. And then I made some food. Yeah, and it was almost anticlimactic eventually. Yeah, it was eye-opening. I don't know how to encounter that kind of fear anywhere else in life, I guess. But I wonder sometimes if that kind of fear, um, with the friends that like we spoke about earlier that have had families, I wonder if that's the same fear that they fear when they see their children in danger, or if it's a different kind of thing entirely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to compare the two either. We had a pretty serious health scare with my son this year, and I would tell you that I cannot imagine anything more terrifying. But listening to you tell that story, I'm like, okay, I don't know how to compare these two kinds of fear. And I am sure that you struggle with it too. Like even as articulate as you were in telling that story, it's like you're trying to explain to me what it's like walking around on the moon. Like I can't imagine being in that environment, that alone, that isolated, sliding down the back of a 12-meter wave. I I don't know. I don't know how to I don't know how to get my head around that.
I've got some great video. If you check out the Instagram right around those times, and this would have been in January of 2024.
Okay, I will absolutely.
As I say in the video, that the phenomenal cosmic joke of that stuff is that, the ocean is inherently a 3D medium, and cameras are inherently 2D. So like you can't tell.
Yeah.
And the funniest part is, I like birds. I think birds are interesting. I don't know when that happened. I know it's like I wasn't a bird guy as a kid, but one day I was just like, yeah, that birds are cool.
Yeah.
And the most disappointing bird I've ever encountered in my life is the great albatross, because they look exactly like a seagull. They're just enormous seagulls. And because the ocean is also enormous, when you see one of these things, it's only when it gets close and you're like, holy crap, that's a seagull that's 11 feet across. But you can't take a picture of it because it's like there's no frame of
Right.
reference. Like,
Yes.
great, another seagull picture.
God, that was an amazing story. We kind of skipped over reaching your antipode, and I'm wondering what that experience is like, given how long you took to prepare, how long it took you to get there, and you're finally like, what's it like? I don't know. You're sailing up to it. You've got the coordinates programmed in. You're getting close. What's that like?
Well, you finish the thing, and it's like, okay, now what? Like I've worked for 6.5 years on exactly this, and now that it's complete, I, I'm I'm left without any sense of direction anymore. Now,
Mhm.
actually reaching the antipode was good because I still had to get home, and so I had 18 more days at sea before I could call things finished, and I could rest and have a beer and have a nap where I wasn't waking up with the tiniest little noises. And that's a whole other story. That took weeks to really really relax. But yeah, it's a kind of a rug pull. For years. Every time I woke up in the morning, I'm like, all right, another day. We're heading towards the antipode. So reaching it, I expected to feel this elation, and I did, and this huge rush of dopamine. But then, like, it faded almost as quickly as, like, when you buy a new TV or something.
Mm.
So like reaching it, in some ways, I think the biggest and most lasting piece was the knowledge that, in my entire life, I've never set a goal and finished things, which could be argued I've never finished anything. You know, like I've finished lots and lots and lots of things, and especially for other people for their projects. But I'd never set out to do something that had a clear end before, and now I know that I can take a project from a concept to a plan to an execution to a completion, and that that knowledge has changed me, because now I know
Hmm.
that on one hand, the world is completely open to me, but it's also made it difficult to try to figure out what to do next because I'm like, okay, well, I know I can do big things, but I know to do big things takes all of me. So if I want to do another thing that's big, it needs to be the right thing because it's going to take all of me. And I haven't found it yet. I don't know what that next thing is going to be. So yeah, like arriving was pretty interesting in itself. So one of the neat things about that point
Hmm.
is if we back way, way, way up, the starting point of this whole project, the place that I was born, the Sussex Hospital, they actually they actually knocked that down in the 80s, and they put up a high school in its place, and they put up a new hospital nearby. But it turns out that's the high school that I went to. And the entire time I was going to school, I didn't realize, but I was like walking over at some points the exact location of my birth. So I got in touch with the high school. What we decided on was that when I reached the antipode, I would put a piece of bread in the water, and someone at the school would put a piece of bread on the ground, and we would make an enormous earth sandwich. And I mean, it's dumb. It's somebody else's idea. It's like it was Zay Frank actually had a thing about earth sandwiches many years ago. But like, I mean, it's a way to engage with the kids in the high school that's still active, that's
Hmm.
still going. I figured it was an
Okay.
educational thing for them as well. I made myself available for, do you guys want a video chat about this? As it turns out, I actually arrived on the weekend. So the bread thing still happened, but I was kind of hoping for a little bit more fanfare, but but school wasn't in. So, and you cannot convince high school students to come in on a Saturday.
Yeah. I know it's taken you 6.5 years to achieve this goal, but it's Saturday and we got things to do. I get it.
that was sort of the thing that happened when I arrived at the spot. I had tons and tons of text messages and stuff. Lots of people were following on Facebook, but at the end of the day, I was 1,000 miles south of Perth, completely alone in like in the middle of the ocean. So it was a little anticlimactic. It was fun to celebrate with people, but what I really could have used was like a hug at that point.
Right.
Just something to be like, it's a little kind of real, honest human connection, and we can get this with video chatting. We can get this with texting, but it's not the same.
Yeah. Well, and just coming back to that, the experience of reaching that goal, it really is in a much more dramatic way. When you set yourself a goal and you reach it, it's never as satisfying as you think. It doesn't last very long. And so, it sounds trite, but you really better enjoy the journey because the goal is not going to be as amazing as you think it is. It's going to fade quickly. It's almost like it doesn't really matter what the goals are because you better like the journey that you're going to take to get there, no matter what it is, because you're going to spend 99% of your time doing that and 1% of the time going, okay, I did it.
That is 100% valid. Yeah, and like maybe the real success was the friends we made along the way, etc. But like the thing that I learned most from this the crazy multi-year sailing project was that the thing that I was lacking the most was community. Whatever my next project is, I need it to have community. I need it to be larger than myself and be working on something together with other humans. This
Mm,
was, in a lot of ways, an incredibly selfish project. I would like my next project to affect myself and a group of others positively. I would like my next project to have some form of permanency, which I think is a really difficult point because I think permanency is an illusion. Like I really like I've
mm,
said for a while that I don't know what I want to build next, but I want to build it out of stone. Um, I think I need a feeling of belonging. I don't necessarily want to lead the next big project. I think I'm quite happy to join something, though I haven't found what that might be yet. what I've decided to do right now, and I don't know if it's going to go through, but as of yesterday, I finally tendered my official application to UCLA for their paramedic program in May. Because the last few times that I've really felt truly happy and satisfied while working on somebody else's project have all been while working for my friend's medical company, and having done a long day of work helping people. Sometimes when you work as a medic, the people that you're helping are having like the worst day of their life, and it feels good to make a difference in those people for those. And the last few times that I've felt really content was like going to sleep in a hammock somewhere off at a music festival, having done, a 12 to 14-hour day of helping people, and I'm physically exhausted and I'm mentally exhausted, but I'm going to sleep going like, I'm content. I'm happy. I've done good work today.
Mm, right.
Getting like really applying myself and improving those skills seems like if I don't have my next project yet, this seems like a good way to spend the time while I try to figure out what's next.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like a pendulum, right? Like after all that time, and I guess, yeah, you mentioned it. I guess it could be seen as kind of a selfish pursuit, and then coming back and like, okay, so the pendulum's going to swing towards more community and being of service to people, and where that pendulum comes to rest might be somewhere between those two things, but that seems like a fairly natural rhythm to get into, given what you've just been through.
I do need some structure. I do, I have been making my own schedules and waking up in my own hours and, making my own to-do lists for a while now, and trying to spin myself back up into a fast-paced and intense environment instead of, just lazing around on a sailboat in the tropics is probably a good idea.
I have so many other things. I might have to have you back, Drew, honestly, because there's so much about your journey and what you've gone through, and your transition back to kind of civilization and what's next, that I just find so compelling. It's inspiring. You've given me so much to think about. I just can't thank you enough for this conversation. I've loved every minute of it.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's great to talk to you as well. I'd be more than happy to come back. Yeah, I mean, it's 6 years worth of stories, and one of the things I'm doing right now is I've sort of committed to giving like an hour presentation about the far other side story. I'm going to work on that. So this is actually great to help me sort of flesh out the stories as well.
Well, I would love to see that. I can't imagine how you well, I guess we just kind of did it, right? I was just going to say, how do you take a 6.5 year journey and condense it into an hour presentation? I guess this was kind of your first stab at doing that. As you said, it's feels like it warrants more than an hour, just like this conversation does, but I would love to hear that story again.
Oh, that's great. I'm more than happy to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. Thanks again. This has been amazing.
No problem. Thanks, Bob.
The Growth Mixtape podcast with Bob Mathers is produced by Bespoke Projects. Music by Jean-Michel Walter Cronkite. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow and rate us. When you do this, it helps to raise our podcast profile so that more people can find us. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn using the link in the show notes.